The rain poured relentlessly that evening, painting the streets with shimmering reflections of city lights as the storm clouds rolled heavy in the sky. The world felt unusually cold for little Lily Carter, a fragile 7-year-old girl with big, innocent eyes that spoke of a childhood burdened far too soon. She stood alone on the pavement, clutching a worn-out teddy bear whose seams had started to come apart, much like her fragile world. Each drop of rain that landed on her delicate skin was nothing compared to the storm raging inside her tiny heart. Her shoes, once white, were now caked with mud, and her clothes clung to her trembling frame. But she paid no mind to the cold or the wetness seeping into her bones. Her focus was fixed on the towering glass building in front of her, its glowing letters spelling out Cross Corporation in bold, imposing letters. Everyone in the city knew the name Ethan Cross, the ruthless, cold-hearted CEO who built his empire on sharp business deals and colder betrayals.
Nice.
Rumors told of a man who never smiled, whose heart was made of stone, and whose presence sent shivers through boardrooms and gala halls alike. But none of that mattered to Lily. To her, he wasn't a legend or a monster. He was the last flicker of hope in her broken world. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she stepped inside the grand marble lobby, her small figure dwarfed by the high ceilings and gleaming floors. The receptionist behind the desk barely looked up, too accustomed to fending off desperate people seeking favors or opportunities from the untouchable CEO. Yet when Lily's small voice quivered, "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I please see Mr. Cross? It's really, really important." The woman faltered, something about the child's tear-soaked face stirring an unexpected pang of concern. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the phone. No one, not even the mayor or celebrity clients, could walk in unannounced to see Ethan Cross. Yet something in those pleading eyes felt different, raw, desperate, and heartbreakingly innocent. After a pause, she dialed the office upstairs, asterisk up on the top floor of the towering skyscraper. Ethan Cross sat behind his massive mahogany desk, the flickering light of his computer monitor casting sharp shadows across his chiseled features. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of a grand clock mounted on the far wall, its steady beat a cold reminder of time's passage. Ethan was a man known for his icy demeanor, his piercing gray eyes, and a demeanor that left even the boldest of men uneasy in his presence. Decades of ruthless business maneuvers had earned him both admiration and fear in equal measure, yet left his heart barricaded behind walls so thick not even his own memories could breach them. As the phone on his desk rang, he let out a sigh of irritation, knowing full well that he had instructed not to be disturbed. "Yes," he answered curtly, his voice as sharp as glass. The receptionist's trembling voice replied, I'm sorry, Mr. Cross, but there's a little girl here. She says it's urgent. She's asking for you by name." Ethan's brow furrowed. "A child? Here at this hour?" Cured despite himself, he ordered, "Send her up." Minutes later, the office doors creaked open, and in stepped Lily Carter. Drenched, shivering, her small hands clutching a faded teddy bear like a lifeline. Her wide, tear-streaked face lifted to meet the gaze of the city's most feared man. Ethan, expecting a scheming parent behind the child, saw no one. Girl was alone. His irritation was momentarily replaced with a flicker of something long buried, a strange, tight ache in his chest. "What do you want, kid?" he asked, voice gruff but not unkind. Lily swallowed hard, her lower lip quivering. Please, Mr. Cross," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Will you marry my mommy? She's all I've got left." The words, simple and desperate, hung in the air like a stone dropped in a still pond, sending ripples through Ethan's carefully guarded heart. For a long moment, silence reigned. Ethan stared at the child, struggling to process what she had just said. In his lifetime of high-stakes negotiations and courtroom battles, no one had ever made a request so pure, so devastatingly sincere. "Where's your father?" he asked quietly, his voice softer than even he intended. Lily's eyes brimmed. With fresh tears, Daddy went to heaven. Last week in a car crash. She clung to her bear, looking so small and fragile in the vast office. Mommy's been crying every night. She thinks I don't hear, but I do. She doesn't smile anymore. And I remembered she told me a story once about a man she loved a long time ago. She said his name was Ethan. That's you, isn't it? At that moment, the carefully constructed walls around Ethan's heart trembled. A name he hadn't allowed himself to think about in years surfaced: Emma Carter. Could it be? He studied the child's face, noting the familiar curve of her chin, the shape of her eyes, a faint resemblance to someone he had once known. A woman he'd pushed away in a reckless quest for power and pride. He felt the blood drain from his face. Your mother's name? He asked, barely managing to keep his voice steady. Is Emma Carter? Lily nodded. She loved you once. But you left her, she said. You broke her heart. The innocent accusation struck harder than any business rival's attack. Ethan looked away, his gaze falling on the rain-smeared windows of the city that no longer seemed so invincible. Asterisk for what felt like an eternity. Ethan remained silent, his eyes locked on the glass window as the storm outside raged on. He could see the city lights blurring beneath the raindrops, clinging to the glass. And for the first time in years, those shimmering lights felt distant, almost insignificant. Memories he had long buried began to claw their way to the surface. Memories of soft laughter, the scent of wildflowers in Emma's hair, and the warmth of her hand in his. They had been young then, reckless and full of dreams, back when he was just another ambitious man with a hunger for success. And she was the woman who believed in him before the world even knew his name. But somewhere along the way, pride and ambition had devoured love, and Ethan, desperate to prove himself in a ruthless world, cast Emma aside without a second thought. He told himself it was necessary, that emotions made a man weak, and for years he believed it, or pretended to, until now. Until this tiny, drenched girl with Emma's eyes stood before him, pleading for something no child should ever have to ask for. He finally forced himself to speak. "Why did you come to me, Lily?" he asked, his voice lower, almost hoarse. "Why not someone else?" Lily sniffled, her small voice cracking. "Because Mommy doesn't have anybody. She lost Daddy. And she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. I just want her to be happy again. And she used to smile when she talked. About you, I thought. If you came back, maybe she'd smile again." It was a child's innocent hope, born from love and desperation. But to Ethan, it felt like a verdict passed on his very soul. For all the power he wielded, he could not undo the past or erase the pain he caused. But maybe, just maybe, he could do something now. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. "Home," Lily whispered, hope flickering in her tear-streaked face. "She doesn't know I'm here. I snuck out when she fell asleep. Please don't be mad at her." Ethan's heart ached in a way that frightened him. He was a man unaccustomed to tenderness, but this child's bravery left him speechless. He picked up the phone, issuing swift, quiet instructions to his driver. Moments later, his car was waiting. Downstairs, and Ethan, for the first time in years, left his office without a meeting, without a plan, without a deal to close. Lily held his hand tightly as they rode through the rain-soaked streets, the city lights passing in a blur. Neither spoke much during the ride. Ethan was lost in thought, haunted by memories of a woman whose heart he had shattered and a life he might have had if he'd made different choices. Lily occasionally glanced up at him, her small face hopeful and nervous. When they finally arrived at a modest apartment building in an older part of town, Lily led the way, her tiny hand never releasing his. The climb to the third floor felt longer than any staircase Ethan had ever taken, his pulse pounding in his ears. Outside the apartment door, Lily hesitated, then looked up at him. "Please, be nice to her," she whispered. And with that, she pushed the door open. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and heavy, trembling with the weight of old grief and unspoken longing. Ethan felt his throat tighten, emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, rising to the surface like a tide. He could no longer hold back. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, and saw not just the heartbroken woman before him, but the girl he had abandoned, The mother who had braved grief alone, and the woman who, despite every right to despise him, still spoke to him without venom. And beside her, Lily clung to her mother's hand, her small face watching them with hope so raw it made his chest ache. In that moment, something inside Ethan cracked wide open, the cold armor he'd built around himself crumbling at last. Dropped to one knee beside them, not as a tycoon, not as a powerful CEO, but as a man stripped bare of his titles and pride. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling, "I can't undo the past. God knows I wish I could. I hurt you. I left you. And if I could go back and change it, I would. But I'm here now, and if you'll let me be a part of your life, of Lily's life. I swear to you I will never walk away again." Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears as she searched his face for signs of deception, but what she saw wasn't the cold, distant man she'd seen in news articles and business magazines. It was Ethan, the one she had once loved so fiercely it made her believe in forever, the one who had made terrible choices, but who now sat before her, broken and real, asking for something no amount of money could buy: forgiveness. Lily looked. Between them, her small hand tugging gently on Emma's sleeve. "Please, Mommy," she whispered. "Don't be sad anymore." Emma felt her heart shatter and mend all at once. The ache of losing her husband, the years of loneliness, the betrayal she'd carried like a stone in her chest, it all surged within her, tangled and aching. She knew she couldn't forget what Ethan had done, nor could she promise to forgive him overnight. But she also saw the man he was now, the way he looked at Lily with tenderness and regret, the way his voice cracked when he spoke her name. And despite everything, a part of her still loved him. Maybe she always had. Emma took a trembling breath, brushing her fingers through Lily's damp hair. "I don't know if we can ever be what we were," she said softly. "I don't know if I can trust you yet, but I can't do this alone anymore. And Lily, she deserves to have someone who loves her. Someone who won't leave." Ethan nodded, his eyes shimmering. "Then let me try," he whispered. "Let me be there for both of you. Even if you can't love me again, let me love you." For a long, aching moment, Emma was silent. Then she reached out, her hand finding his, and the simple touch spoke more than words ever could. It was not a promise of happily ever after, not yet. It was a fragile, hesitant step towards something neither of them believed they'd ever have again: hope. Lily beamed through her tears, wrapping her arms around both of them, her small heart believing that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be made whole again. And in that small, rain-soaked apartment, as the storm outside began to ease, three hearts, long shattered by loss and pride, found the courage to begin healing together. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and heavy, trembling with the weight of old grief and unspoken longing. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, rising to the surface like a tide he could no longer hold back. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, and saw not just the heartbroken woman before him, but the girl he had abandoned, the mother who had braved grief alone, and the woman who, despite every right to despise him, still spoke to him without venom. And beside her, Lily clung to her mother's hand, her small face watching them with hope so raw it made his chest ache. In that moment, something inside Ethan cracked wide open, the cold armor he'd built around himself crumbling at last. Dropped to one knee beside them, not as a tycoon, not as a powerful CEO, but as a man stripped bare of his titles and pride. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling, "I can't undo the past. God knows I wish I could. I hurt you. I left you. And if I could go back and change it, I would. But I'm here now, and if you'll let me be a part of your life, of Lily's life. I swear to you I will never walk away again." Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears as she searched his face for signs of deception, but what she saw wasn't the cold, distant man she'd seen in news articles and business magazines. It was Ethan, the one she had once loved so fiercely it made her believe in forever, the one who had made terrible choices, but who now sat before her, broken and real, asking for something no amount of money could buy: forgiveness. Lily looked. Between them, her small hand tugging gently on Emma's sleeve. "Please, Mommy," she whispered. "Don't be sad anymore." Emma felt her heart shatter and mend all at once. The ache of losing her husband, the years of loneliness, the betrayal she'd carried like a stone in her chest, it all surged within her, tangled and aching. She knew she couldn't forget what Ethan had done, nor could she promise to forgive him overnight. But she also saw the man he was now, the way he looked at Lily with tenderness and regret, the way his voice cracked when he spoke her name. And despite everything, a part of her still loved him. Maybe she always had. Emma took a trembling breath, brushing her fingers through Lily's damp hair. "I don't know if we can ever be what we were," she said softly. "I don't know if I can trust you yet, but I can't do this alone anymore. And Lily, she deserves to have someone who loves her. Someone who won't leave." Ethan nodded, his eyes shimmering. "Then let me try," he whispered. "Let me be there for both of you. Even if you can't love me again, let me love you." For a long, aching moment, Emma was silent. Then she reached out, her hand finding his, and the simple touch spoke more than words ever could. It was not a promise of happily ever after, not yet. It was a fragile, hesitant step towards something neither of them believed they'd ever have again: hope. Lily beamed through her tears, wrapping her arms around both of them, her small heart believing that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be made whole again. And in that small, rain-soaked apartment, as the storm outside began to ease, three hearts, long shattered by loss and pride, found the courage to begin healing together. Asterisk. Paragraph 7. The following morning, the world looked different. Storm had passed, leaving behind streets glistening with rain and the scent of wet earth lingering in the air. Sunlight filtered through the city's smog and cast a soft glow. Over Emma's modest apartment, Ethan arrived just after dawn, carrying a small paper bag of pastries from a bakery down the street and a bouquet of fresh daisies, Emma's favorite, though he doubted she remembered ever telling him so. His heart pounded as he stood before her door, suddenly feeling more like a nervous schoolboy than the feared CEO the world knew. He wasn't entirely sure why he had come so early, but something inside him told him not to let too much time slip by. To his surprise, it was Lily who opened the door, already dressed in her school uniform, her hair slightly mussed from sleep. Her face lit up at the sight of him. "You came back," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his waist without hesitation. Ethan knelt, returning the embrace, feeling the warmth of her trust seep into the cold places inside him. "I promised I would, didn't I?" he murmured, glancing up as Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, her hair loosely tied back. She blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting him this early. "You didn't have to come so soon," she said softly, though there was no irritation in her tone. If anything, there was a trace of something gentler, a quiet acceptance. "I wanted to," Ethan replied simply, offering the bag of pastries and the bouquet. "I thought you might like these." Emma hesitated, then reached for the flowers, her fingers brushing his in the exchange. For a moment, their eyes met, and the air shifted again, something fragile and unnamed passing between them. She inhaled the scent of the daisies, and to his relief, a small smile curved her lips. "Thank you," she said quietly. It wasn't a grand forgiveness or a sweeping declaration, but it was enough. They shared breakfast together, Ethan helping Lily with her math homework while Emma tidied the small kitchen. It felt strangely natural, as if this life, this quiet, domestic normalcy, had been waiting for him all along. Lily chattered about school and the new book she was reading. And though Emma mostly listened, Ethan could see her walls slowly lowering, her laughter soft and tentative, but real. When it was time for Lily to leave for school, Ethan offered to walk her to the bus stop. The little girl's eyes lit up at the offer, and Emma, after a brief hesitation, agreed. On the walk, Lily spoke in the bright, hopeful way only children could. She told him about her father, how he used to make pancakes in funny shapes, how he read bedtime stories in silly voices, how he told her the stars were holes poked in the sky so the light from heaven could shine through. Ethan listened with a lump in his throat, knowing he could never replace the man she had lost, but silently vowing to honor him by being better than the man he had been. When the bus arrived, Lily hugged him tightly before boarding, her small hand waving from the window until the bus turned the corner and disappeared. Ethan stood there a moment longer than necessary, watching the empty street, feeling the unfamiliar ache of longing. When he returned to the apartment, Emma was sitting by the window, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She didn't look up immediately, but when she did, her gaze was softer than it had been the night before. "She likes you," Emma said, a note of wonder in her voice. "Kids are good at sensing people." Ethan shrugged, leaning against the doorway. "She's remarkable. So much like you." That drew a faint, wistful smile from Emma. "I don't know what I'm doing most of the time," she admitted. "It's just been the two of us for so long. Some days it's a fight just to get out of bed." Her honesty disarmed him. This wasn't the carefully curated world of boardrooms and polished personas. This was real, raw, and Ethan realized how much he had missed it. The unvarnished truth of human connection. "I can't fix everything," he said softly, "but I can be here. As much or as little as you'll let me." Emma looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's see where this goes." Weeks passed, and though the changes were slow, they were undeniable. Ethan began visiting the small apartment daily, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes simply showing up to walk Lily to school or share a quiet dinner at the worn dining table. Each day chipped away at the years of distance between them. He traded board meetings for bedtime stories, and conference calls for early morning walks in the park with Lily, who now clung to him as if he'd always been there. Emma, still cautious, watched as Ethan found his place in the rhythms of their life. There were moments she caught herself smiling without realizing it. Moments she noticed how easily Lily laughed now, how much lighter the apartment felt. The dark cloud that had hung over their home since her husband's death began to lift, little by little. Though grief still lived quietly in the corners of their hearts, it no longer suffocated them. It became something softer, a shadow that no longer defined their everyday. Ethan didn't make grand promises, nor did he try to replace the man Emma had lost. Instead, he learned the quiet art of being present, of listening when Emma needed, to vent, of knowing when to offer a hand and when to simply sit in silence. There were setbacks, of course. Old wounds don't heal without aching, and some nights Emma would find herself staring at the framed photograph of her late husband, guilt, tugging at her chest for the growing feeling she couldn't deny. Ethan, for his part, wrestled with his own regrets, sometimes overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd thrown away and the delicate second chance he'd been given. But each morning, without fail, he showed up, and slowly Emma let him in. She let herself laugh at his terrible attempts at cooking, allowed him to fix the leaky faucet he once would have hired a contractor for, let him see the messy, unguarded parts of her life. And in those small, unremarkable moments, they began to build something neither of them had expected, not a resurrection of what once was, but the fragile beginnings of something new. Lily flourished in the warmth of it all, her nightmares becoming less frequent, her laughter louder and more carefree. The neighborhood noticed too, the once reclusive Emma Carter, now seen walking hand in hand with the man who, rumor had it, was the ruthless Ethan Cross. But behind the closed doors of the small apartment, titles and reputations held no weight. It was on a chilly evening, with autumn leaves gathering in the gutters and the scent of wood smoke in the air, that Ethan made his quiet proposal. Not in some lavish restaurant or on a tropical beach, but in the living room of the home he now thought of as his own. Was already asleep, and Emma sat curled on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, her hair loose and slightly damp from the bath. They talked about nothing and everything, and as the clock chimed midnight, Ethan reached into his pocket, his hands uncharacteristically unsteady. "I know this might be too soon," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "And I would never ask if I wasn't sure of what I feel. I don't have a speech prepared. I don't have a perfect plan. But I do have a ring, a heart that belongs to you. I want to be here for you. For Lily, not just today, but for every storm, every ordinary day, and every quiet night like this. Will you? Would you let me spend my life trying to be worthy of you both? He held out the ring, simple and elegant, a far cry from the extravagant jewels he could have chosen. Emma stared at it, her breath catching, her heart thundering. In her chest, tears filled her eyes, and for a long moment she couldn't speak. Then, without a word, she took his hand, lacing her fingers through his, and nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Yes, it wasn't just a yes to the proposal, but to hope, to healing, to the future they never thought they'd have. In that small, worn apartment, love returned, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet resilience of hearts choosing one another after everything they'd endured. The story of Emma, Ethan, and little Lily wasn't a fairy tale. It was something far better. It was a testament to forgiveness, to second chances, and to the kind of love that's earned, not taken for granted. And as Ethan held Emma close, Lily's soft breathing a lullaby in the background, he realized he was finally home.